The first scene involving hyperspace in the new Disney era is poetically aboard the Millennium Falcon. Finn and Princess Palpatine have just miraculously escaped death by laser blast and made it into orbit over Jakku when out of nowhere a massive freighter appears and eats the Falcon. Hey look, it's Chewie, and Han's so old, but how? It's been less than 10 minutes since the Falcon was even fired up. How did they get here so fast? How did they even know where to get to? Well, Han mentions they found the Falcon's frequency on their scanners, but no, you can't just scan the galaxy for a single ship's frequency. There are literally billions of ships out there. You're telling me that your little scanner can pick up a single frequency and its active location amongst all the radiation and interference in all of space, and meanwhile my phone can't even get a 5G signal through a slice of cheese? No way, pal. Also, wouldn't whatever frequency he's scanning for have already been changed or altered by all the different people who have stolen the Falcon over the years? I'm thinking that answer would be yes. Also, if you can just scan for a specific ship's frequency across the whole Bothan loving galaxy, then why in space would Ryan need to invent hyperspace tracking? When the Resistance escapes Dakar, why couldn't the First Order just scan for the Radis's frequency and find them that way? Problem solved. So stupid. Anyway, there's no time to think about any of that because now we get to witness our first on-screen hyperspace jump in over 30 years, during which Rey gets the honor of fixing something on Han's ship that he couldn't figure out himself because he's a man and men are stinky. This first hyperspace jump takes them from Jakku right here to a planet called Takodana, where Maz's castle is. And it's here that we'll take a moment to revisit a few of the mechanics behind hyperspace travel. Now, this is just going to be a quick run through, but if you want to learn more, I made a whole video a few months ago where I break down exactly how hyperspace travel was established to work before Disney took over. So go watch that if you want the deep dive on hyperspace lore, but for the purposes of this video, there are really only two main points we need to establish. One, the Star Wars galaxy is really big, and two, it takes a freaking while to travel across it. Now, how long exactly depends on a number of factors, but the most significant of those is the class of hyperdrive with which your ship is equipped. Now, here are the most common classes and their typical use cases. And while Class 1 is the fastest hyperdrive legally available, if you're willing to make a few special modifications yourself, you can, for lack of a better term, overclock your Class 1 hyperdrive to be even faster. Slave 1 manages to reach what would be the equivalent of a Class 0.7 hyperdrive, while the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy can make 0.5. Now, even with all that raw horsepower, or bantha power, under the proverbial hood, hyperspace travel is still far from instantaneous. Now, the general consensus is that very first jump we see in A New Hope from Tatooine to Alderaan took the Falcon about 2 days to travel. Now, following the pre-established hyperspace lanes and using the industry standard pasta per centimeter method to calculate the distance, we can determine that this 2-day trip covered about 48,000 light years. That gives us a hyperdrive speed for the Millennium Falcon of about 24,000 light years per day, or 1,000 light years per hour. This is, for all intents and purposes, the absolute fastest anyone can travel across the galaxy, and this is the baseline that all of our calculations moving forward will be working from. Now, this first jump in The Force Awakens from Jakku to Takodana is a short enough jump to not have to delve too deeply into it. Less than a day of travel on the Falcon, and our heroes remain there until the arrival of the First Order and the Resistance. But that's where things start to get messy, because the First Order should not be here right now. It's actually impossible for them to be here right now. Let me explain. At the beginning of the movie, Kylo Ren and the First Order arrive on Jakku, and after BB-8 escapes, they're still in orbit over Jakku. In fact, the movie makes a point of showing us that they're still in orbit over Jakku right before the Falcon makes the jump to Takodana, and yet, somehow, by the time the Falcon makes it to Takodana, the First Order is already back at Starkiller Base, which is all the way up here. And then after Kylo meets with Snoke, prays to Vader, and destroys the Hosnian system, Kylo and the First Order suddenly appear on Takodana. That's a round trip of almost 100,000 light years in what appears to be only a few hours. That is actually impossible. And speaking of impossible, let's talk about Han and Finn flying the Bothan-loving Falcon while in hyperspace through a planetary defense shield and into the planet's atmosphere. Now, this is one of those things that has already been deeply critiqued by the Star Wars community, but just to run through it again for posterity, no, you cannot, under any circumstances, no matter how famous a pilot you are, emerge from hyperspace in atmosphere. There are a host of reasons why, the majority of which I'll go over when we talk about this, but the biggest reason is gravity. Now, remember back to that very first first time hyperspace travel is talked about, and remember who was saying it. Han says that you need precise calculations when traveling through hyperspace to prevent you from flying right through a star or bouncing too close to a supernova. Now the danger there is not because stars and supernovas are too hot and you might get burned up if you pass too close. It's because of their gravity wells and the way gravity affects ships in hyperspace. If you fly too close to a large gravitational mass while in hyperspace, the gravitational pull of that mass will cause you to be pulled out of hyperspace and probably smash into that mass, in this case planet-sized laser cannon, at light speed. So even if Han was stupid enough to try this move, and even if he was somehow able to bypass the Falcon's emergency proximity sensors, the maneuver itself is actually physically impossible, and the three of them should be very dead right now. This is incredibly stupid, and it makes me sad to watch it. And the sadness continues as we are treated to a high school production of the Battle of Yavin, after which the Resistance head back to their base and Rey goes to Octo 2. Now there's no time frame given for these jumps, and they're the last on-screen ones we see, so whatever. I am so done talking about this dumpster fire of a film, because now it's time to talk about this house fire of a film. The Last Jedi squelched its way into theaters in 2017 and laid its disgusting, desecrated corpse before us, and since then it has been torn to shreds by so many people that there really isn't a whole lot left to say. Most of the big issues in this movie, like the hyperspace tracking and kamikaze, have been so thoroughly dissected that its criticisms are practically rote at this point. But it bears repeating. Hyperspace tracking breaks everything. In ye olden times, the ability to jump to hyperspace was your get-out-of-jail-free card. If you could make it to hyperspace, you're probably going to live to fight another day, because your enemy had very limited options to figure out where you were going. And really, the only way to actually follow a ship through hyperspace, at least in the before times, was with a homing beacon. And you could have easily done something similar here. Maybe during the battle over Dakar, the First Order secretly sends out a little droid that latches onto the hull of the Raddus. Maybe even a buzz droid, get those prequel keys a-jangling. This could show the intelligence and competence of the First Order, and it could explain why Hux entertains that ridiculous conversation with Poe at the beginning of the movie. You could have had him purposefully engaging with Poe's juvenile antics as a stalling technique while the buzz droid, or whatever, implants its homing beacon into the hull of the Raddus. Or if you don't want to go the conventional route, you could look into the expanded universe and the almighty Interdictor-class Star Destroyers. These ships housed massive artificial gravity well generators that could mimic the gravitational pull of a planet. Remember we talked about how gravity affects ships in hyperspace? These interdictors were often parked alongside hyperspace lanes, and their gravity fields would yank passing ships out of hyperspace and straight into an Imperial ambush. And in battle, these ships were used to prevent enemy ships from being able to escape into hyperspace in the first place. These interdictors were very powerful, but not world-breaking. They were built on existing artificial gravity technology, you know, the type that allows you to walk around on starships, but just scaled it up tenfold. Interdictor cruisers are a far less OP technology than active freaking tracking, and unlike active freaking tracking, they've been a part of Star Wars for decades. All you had to do, Ryan, was pick up literally baby's first EU book, and there it is. Heck, you don't even have to go that far back. Our Lord and Savior Dave Filoni already brought them into canon through Rebels. Look, it even has 4 big boobs on it. We all know how much you enjoy that imagery, you boob. And speaking of things that dramatically impact the galaxy moving forward, let's talk about that Holdo maneuver. First of all, how dare you? Second of all, no, that's not how any of this works at all, and here's 13 reasons why. Number 1, ships that small should not be able to have cloaking devices, so this ruse shouldn't even be possible in the first place. Number 2, the proximity sensors aboard the Raddus would prevent the ship from making the jump anyway due to the fleet of warships directly in its path. Number 3, you can't just jump in a random direction. Remember, ships in hyperspace have to follow specific hyperspace lanes, and that calculation takes time. Number 4, the second the Raddus stops to turn around to face the Supremacy, it would have immediately come within range of the First Order's cannons and therefore would have been destroyed immediately, before any jump could be attempted. Number 5, a collision with the fleet while in hyperspace is not physically possible since, again, hyperspace is a separate dimension. As soon as she throws those levers, she's no longer on the same plane of existence as the First Order's fleet, and therefore a collision is impossible. Number 6, if she wasn't yet in hyperspace when she hit the ship and was only going at light speed, that presents 2 possible outcomes, neither of which are what we see in this film. Either A, a collision of that many particles at the speed of light would likely cause such a devastating nuclear force that it would vaporize the entire star system, or more likely, she would miss the fleet entirely, because number 7, you can't aim at something and maintain a collision course while flying at light speed. And no, it doesn't matter matter that they have that throwaway line in The Rise of Skywalker about this being a 1 in a million shot. In fact, that actually makes this scene worse, not better. You see, if you were paying attention to the words you were writing, JJ, you'd have realized that a 1 in a million chance of this move destroying the First Order's fleet means the other 999,999 times Holdo escapes into hyperspace unharmed. Those are absolutely insanely good odds for survival. 1 in a million? Who wouldn't take that bet? If that jump actually was 1 in a million, then it's not hyperbole to say that Admiral Holdo had a better chance of going to the emergency room for a pogo stick related injury at some point in her life than she had of dying from this kamikaze attempt. What a freaking hero. Number 8, when she does make the jump to hyperspace, even if she did manage to aim correctly and slam right into the Supremacy, even at light speed, the Supremacy shields would most likely deflect the attack, since energy shields are designed to block laser blasts, which are traveling at, anyone want to take a guess? That's right, light speed. It would be like a fly smashing into a windshield. Number 9, it opens a massive plot hole for past stories, as in, well, why didn't they just Holdo maneuver the darn thing? And in the same breath, number 10, it opens up plot holes for future stories, as in, why don't they just Holdo maneuver the darn thing? Number 11, why in space is she even here at all? Why not leave a droid behind to pilot the ship? We know the Resistance is perfectly willing to sacrifice droids if they think it'll make their life slightly more convenient, so why not use one here? For that matter, number 12, why the kamikaze attempt in the first place? The Raddus has enough juice for one more jump, right? So once the rest of the Resistance is safely away, why wouldn't she just jump to another random system and have the First Order follow her there? She would still be killed, but the First Order would probably assume they killed the whole Resistance along with her. And finally, and most damningly, number 13. This jump is hailed by fans of the movie, and clearly by the movie itself, as some kind of heroic sacrifice. Now, like I said, she had a pretty good shot at surviving this attempt, so her quote-unquote sacrifice was really just bad luck, but I'm willing to admit that she is putting her life on the line here. But that means that this one sacrifice severely diminishes the sacrifices of other heroes. People like Commander Dries, Biggs Darklighter, Andor and the Rogue One crew, and even from this movie, Rosa's sister, Finch Dallow, and that one A-Wing pilot that gets a suspicious amount of screen time. All heroes in their own right who sacrificed their lives for the cause actually died for nothing, since apparently all any of them had to do was throw a droid in a freighter and Holdo maneuver their troubles away. Absolutely ridiculous. But alright, kamikaze bad, we get it. So before I devolve further into madness, let's turn our attention back to the map of the galaxy and explore the geography of this movie, because geography can't drive you mad, right? Right? Okay, so Dakar, the Resistance's base, is located here. This is where the Resistance is trying to escape from at the beginning of the movie. Crate, the definitely not Hoth planet that they end up on, is here. Not that big of a jump, so far so good. Of course, Octu is over here with Sad Luke and Rey, and that's it. Oh, wait, Canto Bite. Of course, how can I forget this very important and impactful side quest? Silly me. Now, where is that little guy? How? What? How could you do this? How could you think this is okay? Canto Bite is literally a galaxy away, and you expect me to believe they flew there on this? This? Look at this thing. It's an escape pod with a little boner on top. Are you out of your mind? That's over 100,000 light years in an escape pod. Do you have any idea how much time that would have taken? What kind of hyperdrive could possibly be crammed into this thing? A class 15? This little ship would take months to reach Canto Bite. And the worst part is, you just know that the only reason this planet is located all the way up here is because this is the corporate sector. And Rai Rai is such a big boy socialist that he couldn't help but stick his overdramatic, indelicate, ham-fisted critique of capitalism into that particular sector. Hot dang, what a stupid movie. The fact that they're meant to arrive there and get back to the fleet in a matter of, what, hours? In this? 100,000 light years in this is so utterly impossible that it might as well be the myth of having a nation thrive under communism. And remember what I said in the last video about not pinning yourself in by establishing time frames for these jumps? About how if you don't explicitly give us a ticking clock, then you can maybe make the argument that more time has passed than what we're shown?
Fleet's only got 18 hours of fuel left. 18 hours of fuel left. 18 hours of fuel left.
It should go without saying at this point, but The Last Jedi decisively took the crown as the most broken representation of hyperspace in the franchise to date. 100,000 light years in explicitly less than 18 hours in an escape pod. I know it's not an escape pod, I know it's a troop transport, but you get the idea. Absolute clown show. And at the time, I thought, naively, it couldn't possibly get worse than this, right? But then...
Somehow Palpatine...
If The Force Awakens was a dumpster fire and The Last Jedi was a house fire, then The Rise of Skywalker is an orphanage fire. It's bigger, it does more damage, but does anyone actually care? The movie opens with Kylo Ren on Mustafar, because why not, I guess. He finds a magic pyramid that takes him to a magic planet where magic people have magically resurrected Palpatine. This planet is called Exegol, and it's over here, whatever. Next up is the hyperspace skipping scene. Oh boy, the skipping. So Poe and Finn get the secret message from the First Order spy in a system way over here in the eastern regions of the Mid-Rim. And then they're chased out of there by TIE fighters. TIE fighters which not only apparently house hyperdrives now, but also hyperspace trackers. Listen, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but do you guys remember the hyperspace tracker from The Last Jedi? Remember how Ryan at least attempted to justify this bullcrap by putting it on the largest starship ever made and gave us an explicit line that talks about it having its own Class A power source, whatever that means? Remember how people used all of those throwaway lines to try and justify the existence of hyperspace tracking? Well, screw that, because now all of that nonsense can fit snugly into a freaking TIE fighter. A TIE fighter that shouldn't even have a freaking hyperdrive in it. Also, if a tiny little compressor put too much stress on the Falcon's hyperdrive, then what kind of stress does all of this nonsense put on it? What kind of stress does it put on the Falcon's navicomputer? In the original movie, it took the Falcon almost a full minute to calculate the jump to hyperspace. But here, Poe is just pulling the hyperspace levers back and forth like it's a friggin' stick shift or can crusher or something. It's so stupid. Anyway, once the team is back together on Discount Yavin 4, they relay the somehow message to the rest of the Resistance, and son of a bantha, JJ takes another step in the poo-doo. Poe announces that Palpatine will be launching his fleet of thousands of planet-killing Star Destroyers, don't even get me started, in just 16 hours. Now, in The Last Jedi, we just went over why it's a bad idea to put a ticking clock on your hyperspace travel, especially if you decide to spread your adventure out over the entire Bothan-Lovin galaxy. However, take a look at this. Now here's Exegol, where the Emperor and his fleet are, and here's where our heroes are now on Discount Yavin 4. Oh, okay, well, hey, that's a pretty short jump. They do have the fastest ship in the fleet, and they have 16 hours, so as long as they don't need to make any stops along the way, they'll be fine. They don't need to make any stops along the way, do they? Dun, 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 dun. I don't even have the words. This is just so silly. Why are you being this silly? Who told you you were allowed to be this silly? Stop being so silly. How is Rey supposed to fly? I can't even believe this is real. 300,000 light years, circling the entire freaking galaxy in less than 16 hours. What the? I actually had to get a second piece of spaghetti to measure this trip. That's how long it takes. Yeah, 16 hours? So hyperspace is actually just teleportation now. Great, just great. Actually, you know what? Let's pretend it is. Let's all go to pretend land for a minute, where JJ pretends he's ever gonna work again, and let's pretend that hyperspace is just teleportation. Even then, you gotta imagine it would have taken the Resistance techs at least a couple of hours to get the Falcon flyable again. I mean, look at her. Look how they massacred my girl. I dropped my car off to get tires once and they gave me a 6-hour window. How long is it gonna take to repair all of this? Not only that, but when Poe gives us the 16-hour timeline, it's nighttime. They don't leave the planet until the next morning. That's 8 of your 16 hours gone already just from sleeping. And then they probably spend at least an hour walking to that stupid festival on Pisana from wherever they parked the Falcon, and then how long was it until they found Darth Uchi's ship? So what do we say, maybe 3 to 4 hours on this planet? And then they fly to Kijimi and spend some significant time there. Enough time for Poe to sit on a roof and reminisce with the Purple Power Ranger. Between that and the lobotomization of C-3PO, we could easily say they spent another 2 or 3 hours here, minimum. Oh, and let's not forget their little stint in the Endor system, where Desert Dweller Rey turns into Captain frickin' Nemo and nimbly sails her little skiff over to the wreckage of the second Death Star, which is somehow still intact after this. And then she proceeds to spend presumably several hours climbing it and searching through it until she finds the Emperor's throne room, where she finds the other magic pyramid, fights Kylo, who's here somehow, steals his ship, flies all the way to Octu, where she plans to just, die. But then she gets a pep talk from Force Ghost Luke, takes his waterlogged, broken down X-Wing through Movie Bob's clogged arteries before finally landing on Exegol. You're telling me JJ, hey, focus, eyes on me. You're telling me that all of that happened on top of traveling 300,000 light years through hyperspace. All of that happened in less than 16 hours. And you want to know the worst part of this? The cruel, dramatic irony? If this film's depiction of hyperspace is applied to the rest of the franchise instead of the other way around, it actually does fix a few things. If you really can fly 3 times the length of the galaxy in just 16 hours, then of course Finn and Rose can fly to Canto Bite and back in less than 18. Of course Kylo can fly from Jakku to Starkiller to Takodana and then back to Starkiller in a day. That's cruising speed. Remember Obi-Wan's big old round trip from the last video? That wouldn't take any longer than a standard Amazon warehouse shift. And that first trip from Tatooine to Alderaan aboard the Falcon, what, 2 hours, maybe? And of course, if the galaxy really is that small, why can't the Mandalorian bounce around from Navarro to Mandalore to Tatooine in an afternoon? Who would take issue with Ahsoka flying through hyperspace in the belly of a whale for what appears to be only a couple of hours and ending up in another galaxy? In fact, forget just hyperspace, let's throw out the world building in general. Of course you can become a crime lord without ever doing any crimes. Why not? Why can't Jabba the Hutt save the rebellion? And why is everyone complaining that one of the characters in The Acolyte isn't even supposed to exist yet? Who cares? This is Star Wars. It's meant for children anyway. A stormtrooper bonked his head in 1977, so nothing matters anymore. This is the sort of careless attitude you see in the world building for the Disney Plus shows, and it stems directly from the incompetent writing of the sequel trilogy. And I know I sound like a broken record, but the onus really does lie with these 3 creators. They set the tone for what is acceptable according to new canon, and then they handed those controls to someone who views this property as his own personal playground. Someone who has no respect for all the work that people like George, Alan Dean Foster, Timothy Zahn, Michael A. Stackpole, Kevin J. Anderson, and so many others put into expanding this galaxy and making it feel real. Someone who hires activists instead of artists. It's an issue that goes down to the roots, all the way back to the beginning. And unless you have a time machine that can take us back to 2013, to the very first writer's room meeting for The Force Awakens, then I don't think any of this can be salvaged. I've only talked about the ways Disney has broken hyperspace lore in this video, but there are so many more world-building issues than just that. Fixing hyperspace would just be a drop in the bucket. It all has to be scrapped, which is why it never will be. Just like with the Marvel franchise, to fully retcon all these years of garbage would be to admit defeat. And these companies are either too proud, too scared, or too both to humble themselves that way. So we'll just keep on waiting. Waiting for something to come along and surprise us. Something like Andor. I wouldn't mind seeing more stuff like that. Sure, all this Skywalker Palpatine nonsense might be going on in the background, but it's like we talked about before. Star Wars doesn't always need to have grand interstellar adventures with intergalactic implications. Doesn't even need Jedi or Sith. All Star Wars really needs to regain their audience is a few good stories told competently and consistently. Real stories with real characters, even if the scope and scale of those stories is simple. As simple as a little alien man on his way to get some grumbo.